I think we're good to start, Raman.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning all, and welcome to the second webinar we are running for organizations interested in becoming a dashboard provider in general, and those wanting to work with us during the early test phase of the program in particular, which some of you may also refer to as the alpha phase of the program. We will give you a bit of a background to the program, an overview of the architecture and the dashboard interactions, some key aspects for you to be aware of, and what our expectations are, and then an opportunity for you to ask questions later. So during the session, feel free to put your questions in the chat field as we go along. We will try and answer all your questions, but any that we are unable to, we will respond in writing via the Dashboard Provider Hub, which has been set up on the Pensions Dashboard Program website. So I'll start off with introductions. My name is Raman Thaliwal. I'm Head of Product for the Pensions Dashboard Program. Could I pass you on to Caroline first?
Hello, I'm Caroline Kyriazis. I'm Communications and Engagement Manager for the programme.
Thank you, Caroline. James?
Good morning, everyone. I'm James Rudin. I'm the Head of Technology Development for Pensions Dashboard.
Thank you. Helen?
Hi, I'm Helen Scrimminger. I'm the Product Owner for Essential Digital Architecture.
Thank you. So with that, we shall start with our program vision. So our vision, it is to enable individuals to access their pensions information online securely and all in one place, thereby supporting better planning for retirement and growing financial well-being. How are we going to achieve our vision? We will do that by delivering the technical architecture necessary for the dashboard service to operate, making sure that the architecture is secure, efficient, effective, and is based on technology that is scalable and extensible. By creating governance arrangements that will protect individuals and support the operation of the dashboard service. And finally, by working with stakeholders and users to create a service design for this dashboard service that delivers a very high level of satisfaction for the users of the ecosystem. Thank you, Caroline. Can we go to the next screen, please? Thank you. So just want to share the Pensions Dashboard's goals with you. We know that people find pensions confusing. Most people do not connect with their pensions until much later in their working career. The goals of the Pensions Dashboards are to connect people with all their pensions, presenting information clearly and in plain English, enabling people to understand what they are seeing and signposting them to impartial guidance and/or regulated advice. Our aim is to increase people's confidence, empowering them to make more informed decisions and choices about their pensions, ultimately contributing to their financial well-being in retirement. Next slide, please, Caroline. This is a very brief history of how we have got to where we have. Back in 2016, following the Treasury announcement in budget about the pensions dashboards, there was an industry-led project managed by the Association of British Insurers, and they were tasked to create a prototype to prove that it is possible to connect a user sitting at a dashboard to their various pensions that they may have with different pension schemes and providers. In 2017, the prototype project published their findings, In 2018, government launched a consultation to get views on what would be the best way of delivering this service, and also to understand what are the key principles that are important to individuals and to organizations. In 2019, the Money and Pension Service started setting up the Pensions Dashboard Program to develop the central digital architecture. And in 2020, over the last year, the dashboard program team undertook industry consultation, which led to the first issue of the data standards. We are working on the next issue of data standards, and we also prepared the technical requirements for the procurement of an organization to build the central technical architecture. In 2021, earlier this year, we led the procurement exercise, and Capgemini, working with Origo, were appointed to develop the architecture. We also defined the alpha and beta stages, and we have started engagement both with data and dashboard providers. Thank you, Caroline. So what we would like to do is just share with you a very high-level journey from a user perspective of what the users can expect from a dashboard.
With more than 2/3 of people holding multiple pensions, it can be tricky to get a clear and complete picture of your pensions. We set up the Pensions Dashboards Programme, or PDP, to tackle this challenge. Dashboards will be the place where you can view information about your pensions in a clear and simple format. But it takes a lot to make that happen. You begin your journey by navigating to a dashboard. Then you submit a request to find your pensions information, which is where things get a bit more involved. First, to keep your data safe, an identity service confirms that you are who you claim to be. You will be asked to give consent for your information to be used to perform the search on your pensions, and to authorize providers and schemes to send your pensions information to the dashboard for you to view. You can withdraw your consent at any time. Now the Pension Finder service takes over. Importantly, it is not a database. More like a switchboard, it never holds any personal or pensions data. The Pension Finder service sends your request to all pension providers and schemes, which return a unique identifier to the dashboard for each matching pension. Then, you can request the pensions information, which the providers and schemes will send directly to the dashboard, where only you can access it. Pensions data will need to conform to a new standard. We are developing this standard with feedback from users as well as government and industry stakeholders to ensure it works for everyone involved. To keep your data safe, the Governance Register will ensure the Pensions Dashboards ecosystem meets the required security and performance standards. And dashboards will enable you to view your pensions information online, securely, and all in one place, so you can get a clear picture of your pensions.
Thanks, Caroline. So what is the technical architecture that will support this? I'm going to pass you on to James, our head of technology, to talk you through that architecture.
Good morning, everyone. So I will be taking you through the spaghetti diagram on the left-hand side. This is a visual representation of the data and user flow through the system. My colleague Helen will then take you through the various APIs that are involved within that. So if we, there are two main sort of user routes through the system. The first one being to find pensions. So this would be where a user accesses a dashboard either for the first time or as a returning user but wants to find their pensions. Now, in this context, dashboard could be an existing pension provider dashboard, a mobile application, single page application. It is quite agnostic on that, because the first thing that actually happens when selecting Find My Pension is a redirect to the pension dashboard's consent and authorization service. Now, if that user is a new user, in that they have not used this service before, they will first need to validate their identification. So at that point, there would be a redirect to an identity service provider who would confirm their identity. Once those attributes have been proved, they will be sent back to the consent and authorization service, where the user can then supplement that information with additional information that was then passed to pension providers for the purposes of searching for any pensions. So the consent and authorization will create that request through the pension finder service and direct that to pension providers via an API, and the user will be returned to the pension dashboard. That really is the end of the journey for the find journey. What then happens in the background is that data providers will, if they do find any matching pensions, will create a unique identifier called PEI, which is then registered with the consent and authorization service and can be retrieved by the dashboard. That then brings us on to the view stage of the process. So when a user logs in to view their pensions rather than find them, the dashboard will take those PEIs, which are dereferenced at this point, and will then resolve them to a URL. That URL is based at the provider where the pension asset is held. So the communication in terms of data flow is directly between the data provider and the dashboard. However, within that process, the data provider will actually contact the consent and authorization service to ensure that there is still consent to actually allow the dashboard to view that pension information. So there is an API between the provider and the consent and authorization service for that purpose. If those consents are still in place, then at that point, the dashboard will be able to pull that information from the data provider to display on their dashboard. Hopefully that explains how each of these elements fit together. My colleague Helen will now take you through the detail of the APIs that are involved. Helen?
Hi everyone. So I have my own spaghetti diagram here, and this really shows you the technical components. On the left-hand side, we've got the API usage that dashboard providers will need to implement, and on the right, for completeness, we've added the data providers. I don't intend to go through those, so I'll start on the dashboard providers. First of all, you need to dashboard providers will need to retrieve any return PEIs. So there's an API that will pull those PEIs. Also, the PEI contains the endpoint that you need to contact for the view. So there's a method of pulling endpoint information so that you can resolve the PEI to the endpoint or pension provider. Then the dashboard will obviously initiate the view API, having resolved the endpoint that's held at the pension provider. And the access and permissions are managed through a protocol called UMA, which sits around all of those connections to the spaghetti diagram. We have a technical working group that's free for anyone to join. So if any of you would like to come along and get information on more detailed information on the APIs, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We haven't received any questions so far, so please, if you do have any questions, do remember to put them in the chat. We will take them now at the end of the session. We have some time set aside for that. Next slide, please, Caroline. So we thought we'd just take you through the activities over the next 6 months that we have planned, and this is sort of the key period over which we are looking at potential dashboard providers to work with us. So starting with October, so Claire, I'll get back to your question at the end of just sort of going through the timeline. Starting with October, we had planned some webinars. This is also the time when we have started the sort of the selection process of the dashboard providers who we would who would like to work with us during Alpha. The first webinar was earlier this week on the 18th. This is the second webinar. There'll still be opportunities to ask questions. You can always get in touch with us via the website or the contact details that Caroline will share later on if you continue to have any concerns, questions regarding this. The deadline for the return of the completed questionnaires, which we will send out to organizations who have expressed an interest to work with us during Alpha, is 5th of November. During November, we will undertake a selection exercise to select the successful candidates who will be working with us during the Alpha stages, the test stages. We plan to announce the successful candidates by mid-December. And in December, we also want to sort of start thinking of what we want to do during private beta, how we select additional dashboard providers to work with us during private beta, at which stage we will be using live data. During the test phases in Alpha, we intend to use dummy data only if we are working with data. January to March, our focus will be, most of our focus will be on user research, and that user research will feed into work around the design standards and design guidance. And that is where sort of all organizations who have expressed an interest to be working with us, our expectation is that this is where we will be working with you to understand how these design standards and design guidance have an impact on you as a dashboard provider, and how we work with you then to agree what these would be. We'll be working very closely with the Financial Conduct Authority as well, because they are the ones who will be regulating the dashboard service. We don't expect at this moment for a connection, a sort of technical connection to the central architecture during this phase. We will keep you informed around when that will happen and how that will happen as we go along. So a lot of this is dependent on the progress that our supplier makes in building the central infrastructure. But for those who will be working with us, and for those who are not, we will keep updating everyone via our website. So just coming to Claire's question, at what point will participants be expected to have an operational dashboard? That'll be private beta, Claire. That is our current assumption at the moment. But as I said, if you're working with us through sort of January, February, March and April, we will know at what stage that expectation is. But again, if you as a dashboard provider are not ready, it is not a requirement. There is no deadline for you to be required to be ready to have an operational dashboard. It is dependent on how quickly you will be able to provide one. Siobhan, how many candidates are we looking for in the Alpha stage? We're looking for about 2 to 3 commercial dashboard providers to work with during Alpha to help us understand sort of what how the design standards and guidance that we build, what impact that has on you as an organizer, as a dashboard provider, and also to help us respond to user research by looking at the prototype that you may have, the front-end prototype that you may have, to do some further research with the users. So 2 to 3 at the moment, but we will also be working closely with the Money and Pensions dashboard team, which is slightly different to the Pensions Dashboard Programme. It sits in a different part of the organisation. Gary, what approval process will dashboard providers have to go through for onboarding apart from FCA? Will there be a kite mark accreditation stamp for providers? So yes, there will be the FCA process, which will be developed and created over the next, during 2022. Will there be another kite mark accreditation stamp? We haven't yet created that or thought a lot about that from our perspective. It is the standards, the design standards, which will be a requirement for anyone who wants to be a dashboard provider. But Helen, could I bring you in if there is anything that you are thinking of from the governance perspective?
Yes, we are potentially looking at that. However, we need to look talk to the regulators and policy colleagues to make sure that the kite mark is something that they want to proceed with.
And Gary, the other thing is this thinking will develop during the next few months, and there will be engagement with organizations who are working with us, and even those who are not working with us via the Dashboard Providers Hub on our website. Okay, thank you, Caroline. So the next slide, I am going to ask Helen to talk us through. Thank you, Helen.
Hi, everyone. Me again. Okay, so it's just a rundown on what's needed as to become a dashboard. So it's going to have a separate regulated activity under the FCA, but obviously anyone wishing to become a dashboard will have to adhere to all of the FCA rules. But it will, as I said, be a new authorised activity. There's not currently any regulation in place, and this is being developed as we speak. So access to the alpha testing will be undertaken on the understanding that authorisation is not guaranteed or automatic when the regime is put in place. And it's expected that once the programme moves from testing into a service using real data, authorisation will be mandated.
Thank you,
Rama.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So again, to the point that Siobhan had raised earlier, so we're seeking 2 to 3 dashboard providers who will be working with us during this early phases during Alpha. Working with us will allow you to provide some input into the development of the key processes to support the onboarding and management of the dashboard provider community. So this is about sort of what technical support is needed, how do we make that process as smooth as possible. Service and the design standards, which I have already mentioned, that will underpin the presentation of pensions data to users. Also development of regulations and how they are applied by FCA. And provide input into the testing of the architecture and gain insight into the development of the architecture. However, I do want to point out that we will also be sharing our findings and knowledge openly by a range of means. The dashboard providers hub that I keep referring to definitely is going to be one of those means, and potentially other webinars if we feel there are a lot of questions that we are getting. Thank you. Next slide, please, Caroline. So in return, we ask you to be open and collaborative with other dashboard providers and with us in sharing your existing knowledge and research, and be able to commit resource to this work. That is very important, and if possible, be able to, at a stage when we are using live data, be able to provide a willing client base to support the testing, and be able to share your dashboard prototype for testing and responding to user research. And finally, we want to make sure that any organizations that we select or we are working with have not had previous authorization by FCA withdrawn. I think that was the last slide, Caroline. Is that correct? Yes. So here are a few sort of contact details for you to keep in touch with us. So shall we go to more questions in the chat?
So I've answered Martin's one, I think. Oh, and he said thanks, so that's good. And I've had one question outside of this that's alludes to being able to use the PEI outside of the dashboard. So we don't see any reason why you shouldn't, although obviously the dashboard would not be involved in a resolution of endpoints outside of the dashboard. So using the proportion of the PEI that identifies the asset is probably the level at which it could be used outside of the dashboard. Please correct me if I'm wrong, James.
No, that's correct.
Helen, I'm just checking one of the answers. You mentioned 40 schemes.
Oh, yes, it's 40,000 schemes. Sorry.
Yeah, 40,000.
40 would be so easy. We would be done by the end of next year. Thank you. So Claire has asked another question. So will the alpha phase work be regularly shared with dashboard providers who are not alpha participants? That is the aim, definitely the aim, Claire. And Siobhan, what stage is the development of the identity service? So Siobhan, we are not developing the identity service. We are going to procure an identity provider, identity verification provider. We are currently in the procurement stages of that process.
I just add to that, Raman. Yeah, we are procuring an interim identity provider to cover us through alpha and early stages of beta. This is with a view to looking at formulating under the government framework in future when we go to public beta. But certainly for the purposes of development, we are procuring a single identity service for the interim.
Thank you for that clarification, James. Gary, are we interested? Are we testing? Yes, we will be testing web and app based functions. Sorry, James, Helen, do you want to add to that?
On, sorry, which question? Gary's?
Gary's question, are you interested in testing different channels for the dashboard provision, like web and app based?
I think during alpha, probably not. I think as we continue, we will look at that in more detail. I think really the main influence on that will be on the user research side rather than the technical, as the route through the ecosystem will be the same, whichever the channel of dashboard provision it is.
Thank you. So Mohammed's question, no call for data providers during the alpha phase while dummy data is used, if I understood. When are data providers involved, called upon to influence the design?
I'll pick this one up as well. So data providers are already involved in influencing the design. That's both through the ecosystem technical working group that Helen shares, but also in that we have 7 data providers who are also undergoing alpha at the same time. Yes, using dummy data to start with to whilst we test all of the connections. But then once obviously the system is in live and security hardened, we will be using live data.
And if I could just reiterate, the design of the front end dashboard will be dependent on the user needs. And of course, we are working with data providers to see how best to provide that data. Paul's question, who and how do I contact to become involved in the mentioned technical working group? Helen, do you want to take that?
Yeah, just contact PDP events. I think Caroline had the contact page there with an email. That's it.
There you go.
Thank you. Events at PDP. I just use that and we'll register you for them.
So just to clarify for everyone, events pdp@maps.org.uk. So if you get in touch with us on that email, we will respond to you very quickly. Any final questions? Siobhan, I may be able to find this one on the website, but could you share when you hope to complete the alpha and beta stages and what is your estimated go live date? Our alpha stage ends in April. Is it May, James?
May.
May.
So we will end alpha in May.
Yeah.
And the first phase of private beta then will start in June. I believe that will take us up to the end of March 2023.
Yeah.
At which point we will then go into the second phase of beta.
Of private and sort of saying, I think it may still be private beta.
Yes, but I believe that's where we will start looking at staged onboarding.
Yeah.
For data providers.
So the go live will really depend on the onboarding timetable as well, and how the service is doing. Will dashboard providers also be expected to undertake user research, or are PDP responsible solely for this? Gary, as a dashboard provider, you may want to undertake your own user research to see what sort of service you want to provide, or what sort of an onward journey you may want to provide. We will definitely undertake user research, but as a dashboard provider, it's up to you if you want to undertake user research to sort of create a product that suits the needs of the users of your service. And we will be sharing the findings from our research, summarized findings from our research on an ongoing basis. So looks like that is it. I can't see anyone typing. Caroline, can you?
No, it doesn't look like there are any further questions.
In which case, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for attending, and thank you for your interest in becoming a dashboard provider. We are keen to stay engaged with you, and we are keen for you to look at our application, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.